Hey guys, so welcome back to Conversations That Matters. This is season 3, and it's the first episode of season 3. And I couldn't be more grateful to have tonight's guest on to start the new season, and that is Dr. John Demartini. I first became familiar with Dr. John Demartini's work. I suppose the first time I recognized him was through The Secret, and then from then until 2016, when my father passed away, I was given the book, The Breakthrough Experience. And then around 2019, 2020, I did the value determination course, and then I did master planning, and then I did the breakthrough experience, and then I became a Demartini facilitator the year later. And for me, learning John's work and learning the Demartini process has had a massive impact and a profound impact on the way I see myself, first and foremost, the way I see the world and the universe around me, and the impact that that's had on me and my ability to be able to coach other people to get them to where they want to be and help them resolve their issues. So first of all, what I want to say, John, is just thank you for your dedication to what you do and understand human behavior, and then teaching that to everybody else. So welcome to the podcast, John.
Well, thank you for the statement, and thank you for the opportunity to be with you.
Fantastic. So I suppose what I want to do and where I want to start from, John, is understanding the Demartini Method first and foremost, and that is what actually really inspired you to create the Demartini Method.
When I was 18 going on 19 years old, my mother asked me, what do I want for my birthday? Because I was born on Thanksgiving Day. So Christmas the month before Christmas was my birthday. And she asked me, what do you want for birthday and for Christmas? And I told her, because I had a thirst for learning, I said, I want the greatest teachings on the face of the earth by the greatest writers and minds who ever lived. And she said, you sure you don't want a t-shirt? That's more of what I had in mind. I said, Mom, I really don't care about a t-shirt, but I do care about learning. So anything you get me, a book or a great book or any classic or anything like that, I would appreciate it. So she had a brother who was my Uncle Ralph, who was a professor at MIT and a chemist and physicist. And she said, look, John's wanting to learn. And, he had learning problems as a child. And you got any great books that could be sent this way? And as a gift, my uncle sent me 2 6x6x6 foot wooden crates on a flatbed truck to our house with thousands of books in it. Now, when I saw that flatbed truck come up and it unloaded it on the ground, I got a crowbar out and I started opening up these crates, and I carried as many as I could into my room, and I filled my room up with thousands of books. And one of the books was a discourse on metaphysics by Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, or Leibniz, depending on how you pronounce it. And in there, in the very first paragraph, the first portion of that chapter 1, was that human beings can come to the realization that they can't improve upon the perfection that already is. And for some reason, that brought a tear to my eye. I didn't know why, but it just seemed like he said that there was a divine perfection, a divine order, a divine love, a divine magnificence in the universe that few people ever get to know, but those that do, their lives are changed forever. And I was inspired to want to know what that is. So I went on a pursuit of what is the hidden order in the apparent chaos in life. That led me to read a book by Albert Einstein called Brownian Movement, on Brownian motion. And he took ditch water and he put it on a little beaker of ditch water. He took a portion of it and put it onto a slide and watched the movements of all the material inside. And there's a thing called Brownian movement by Mr. Brown, Dr. Brown, to coin this term. But Einstein said, if you filter it out and just get one or little debris in there and follow it around, there's a physics to it. If you get 2 in there, it gets more complex, but it's still discernible. If you get 3 in there, it gets 6 times more complex. If you get 4 in, it gets 24 times more complex. If you get 5 in there, it gets 72 times or 120 times more complex, pardon me. And if you get another one in there, it gets 720 times more complex. So every time you add another material into this water, the complexity becomes geometrically more complex by factorials, the mathematical factorials. And so when I read that, I thought, it gets to a point where the human mind has difficulty comprehending the reasons and the order of what's moving, and it becomes so variable that our computational analysis is exceeded. Stephen Wolfram said that there's a computational boundary of the human mind, and anything that goes beyond that boundary we call chaos, and anything within that knowledge base we call order. So I was never satisfied with the idea that there was randomness. And I wanted to know what the hidden order of things going on, particularly in the field of human behavior. So that led me to Ludwig Boltzmann in thermodynamics, who created some formulas that were used in thermodynamics, and Clausius, and Claude Shannon, and 2 Nobel Prize winners on physics that got a Nobel Prize for their work in this area. And I wanted to know what was the hidden order in the chaos of human behavior. So that started at age 18. As weird as that may sound, picking up girls wasn't my thing at the time. It was just trying to solve those.
Yeah.
I already had enough girls in the teenage years. I was focused on wanting to learn at that moment. And so I set out to find a hidden order in human behavior. And that brings a tear to my eye even thinking about it, because that's what I love doing. Why do people do what they do? And why do people have events in their life? And how do you discover the order? Now, Claude Shannon said that entropy is missing information. And order is resuming that information, reclaiming that information. And so mindfulness is being fully aware of pairs of opposites simultaneously. And mindlessness is when you see only one side with some sort of subjective bias and you're deleting out the information. So if you infatuate with somebody, you're conscious of the upsides, but you're blind to the downsides. If you're resentful to somebody, you're conscious of the downsides, but blind to the upsides. And these are what most people live by. They judge and they seek and avoid impulsively, instinctually, with their amygdala. The amygdala assigns valency to the hippocampus. The hippocampus then, stores that in the subconscious mind, you might say. And we have these judgments, and they run our lives. And most of the time, we're run by them, but they're all based on incomplete information. Survival mentality, I call it. So I wanted to know, how do I get to mindfulness? How do I get to enlightenment? How do I get to grace? How do I get to a synthesis and synchronicity of opposites in the mind? How do I get to a simultaneous contrast in the mind? How do I get to the coincidence and the synchronicity of opposites as Jung described and Wolfgang Pauli described? How do I find negentropy that Erwin Schrödinger described in his one mind model? And, how do we get to a place where there's just grace? I want to find a way of scientifically reproducing a spiritual experience where there's just awe and seeing a perfection that's not one-sided. Most people think of perfection, well, I'm nice without mean or kind without cruel. No, that's not perfection. That's delusion. The perfection is the pair of opposites simultaneously born in the awareness of the human psyche. So that led me to study everything I could get my hands on that might give me an insight to that, from atomic physics to nuclear physics to quantum physics to astronomy to cosmology to mathematics to physics and thermodynamics and the brain and psychology and philosophy. And I mean, there's been no stone unturned as far as I'm concerned. 300 different disciplines, all for the sake of finding the hidden order in apparent chaos. And I found some. I found ways of finding it. And the Demartini Method is the culmination of 51 years of putting that together. And it's based on the questions we ask. The quality of our life is based on the quality of the questions we ask, because the question, the significance of a question is the ability to discern and pull out information you're not aware of. So if, let's say, you're infatuated with somebody and I ask you, so what are the downsides of the woman? Well, I haven't thought about that. What are the downsides? Well, yeah, she talks a lot. Okay. And she's a little bit demanding. Okay. And yeah, she's not always prompt. And I started doing it, and I calmed down the infatuation. And then once I level the playing field and balance it, the man feels love for the person, not infatuation. And if I go and take somebody they resent, and I go, so what are the upsides to the person you resent? Well, there aren't any. Well, let's take a look. Let's hold you accountable to answer the question. What are the upsides? Because there are. You just aren't looking at them. And once I bring them up and they're equal in the other one, then there's love for them. So I can take anything that's judged and turn it to love. Empedocles in the 6th century BC said that there was love and strife. And when you integrate the elements, you get love. And when you disintegrate them, you get strife. Well, he was saying something very true. It's still useful today. But the elements are the perceptions that we have. If we have water and earth, we're seeing the downside. If we have fire and air, we're seeing the upsides. So they're just a different way of describing the same thing, because fire and air is up going up and water and earth is going down, and condensing versus rarefying. So the same laws of Parmenides and Heraclitus, they said the same principles. And when Heraclitus talked about the unity of opposites, he gave the hint to how do we find the hidden order in things. So I've been standing on the shoulders of giants and philosophers and thinkers and scientists and Nobel Prize winners and physicists and cosmologists and psychologists and neurologists, and trying to piecemeal as much of the information as I possibly can, chemistry, biophysics, you name it, genetics, anything that might give us an insight on how to maximize the order in our chaos. And that's what the Demartini method is. It's been a culmination of 51 years of development, that to give people, with a series of questions, an awareness of silence and grace, in awe of the hidden order, the perfection that's there, that was there the whole time, but we couldn't see it.
Yeah.
And bring them to a state of where there's just thank you, I love you to people again.
Fantastic. And it's such a profound tool. And when I'm coaching people and using the Demartini method, one of the things that always pops up is, I've never seen it that way before. I've never seen it that way before. When you start to get people, they actually, as you said, balance out their mind and extract the unconscious information that's there out of them and bring them back into balance again, they see things completely different. So for you, John, then when you were starting off in that process, how did you actually develop the method itself? So you were a chiropractor to begin with, isn't that right? How did that then make that transition and they just, well, you know what, I want to solely focus on human behavior and the Demartini method and develop that? Was that working on yourself? Was it trial and error, working with other people and just developing the method as you went?
Well, when I was 17, I had a dream to be a teacher, healer, and philosopher, traveling the world and go to every country on the face of the earth and share my research findings with people. That was my 17-year-old vision. When I was studying healing, I went pre-med in school, but I didn't believe we had an excess of organs and a deficiency of drugs. I never was a believer of that. I believe that we had the power inside our body to bring healing. And so chiropractic was the only philosophical thing that made sense to me at the time. And so I chose chiropractic as my healing art. But I knew when I graduated, I told my first assistant that I hired, I said, I'm going to be practicing for 5 years, and then I'm going to be traveling the world lecturing. But I want to build an enormous practice in the meantime. And I did. And that led me to wanting to speak to other health professionals eventually. But I was doing that before I got into chiropractic college. I was already developing the method. And these things were all developing from way back 17, 18 years old, 18 mainly. And so I was working on it. I already had pieces of it together before I even graduated from professional school. But I was never satisfied with just not allowing the person to have their power back. I didn't want them to have to depend on a drug. I didn't want to have to depend on a doctor. I wanted them to have a tool that they could rely on themselves. Self-reliance from Emerson was important to me. And so anything that could help people empower their life is what I was interested in. And so the first step of the Demartini method was just pure reflective awareness. I realized many years ago that whatever I saw in other people, this is about 39 years ago, whatever I saw in others, I had in me. So I went to the Oxford Dictionary 39 years ago, and I said, all right, I'm going to go to the dictionary and I'm going to look up every possible human behavior trait. I'm going to write out to the side the name of the person, the individual that displays it to the fullest. And then I'm going to go look inside myself until I find out where I have it 100% to the same degree. And I found it. I found that there was nothing somebody else had that I didn't have. Nice, mean, kind, cruel, vicious, honest, dishonest. I mean, I had everything. When I was really honest with myself, I had every trait that I saw. I had thoughts of wanting to, sometimes I was so angry I wanted to kill somebody, and sometimes I was saving people's lives. I literally had a boy that was in a coma. I brought him out of my coma with my hands. I've seen both life and death on there. I was involved in a car accident where a lot of people died. I've also saved lives. So I saw every one of those things that were in my life. And that was an eye-opener, because then I realized whatever I see in others, I have. When I'm pointing my finger, it's because if I'm resenting them, it's because it's reminding us something I'm feeling ashamed about. I've dissociated from the shame with pride, and I'm too proud to admit I've done it, but I have done it. And so the Demartini method was asking questions to make you accountable, to find out what you were judging in others, where you had it inside you. Same for admiration. Everything I admired in people, I also had, or I wouldn't be able to admire it. So the first step of the Demartini method was to have reflective awareness and transparency, to realize that whatever you see in others, you have within you. The seer, the seeing, and the seen are the same. And that was the beginning of it. That was the first practical tool. Then I realized that the very trait that I thought was terrible, a day, a week, a month, a year, 5 years later, I look back and go, thank God that occurred. Or I'm thankful that occurred. And then I realized, well, why have the wisdom of the ages with the aging process? Why not just find out how it serves me now instead of waiting 10 years to find it? Because I'm going to be aging to learn that truth. Why not find that truth immediately? So I started asking questions. What are the upsides to the traits that are down? So I went back to the dictionary, I took the traits, and I took a trait that was considered bad trait in the moral hypocrisies of society. And I said, so what's the benefit of it? If it's here, it must serve people, or it would have gone extinct. Anything that serves human beings stays here. If it doesn't, it goes extinct. So if it's here, it serves. And these things have been around for thousands of years. So what's the benefit of these things? So I started looking and started compiling the benefits of all the traits were considered evil, and all the traits were considered good. I found the downsides of it, and I leveled the playing field. And then I realized that the traits are neither positive or negative, neither good nor evil, but thinking makes it so. And our own bias and our own moral hypocrisies trap us into thinking so. And therefore we get caught with all kind of emotional biases and misinformation, and we lose sight of the hidden order. So then the next step was balancing out that equation, and then going and holding people accountable to look at the upsides to what they thought was down and the downsides to what they thought was up, and break the illusion that there is such a thing. And that was eye-opening. I used to have people do 100 lines of just those initially. That was the breakthrough. At the breakthrough, they did 100 lines of where do they do the same behavior and what's the down or upsides to balance it out. And then I realized, well, I'm still doing it on people on the outside, but what about me on the inside? And I realized that if I dissolve my shame, my resentment to others disappears. And I've proven that thousands of cases. I've had people that are really resentful to somebody, and I go, okay, so where have you done that? Well, I've never done that. I said, where have you done it? And I help them find it until it's equal. And then now go to the moment you did it, and whoever you did it to, how did it benefit them? And they couldn't find it. I said, if you can't find it, you're going to feel shame. And that's why these people are reminding you of it. And that's why you're resenting them, because they're bringing out your feelings of shame and you wanting to dissociate from it. And then I go in and find out how it served all the people they did it to. And the resentment disappeared. They weren't resentful to those people anymore. And they didn't get their button pushed anymore. And I realized if I dissolve the prides and shames of people, their buttons are gone. So that was the next step in the Demartini method. Then I started realizing that people are coming to me and saying, well, my mother was always mean to me. Always? 24 hours a day? No, well, most of the time. Most of the time, this sounds like a distorted generalization about your mom. It sounds like she fed you, she bathed you, she cleaned you, you bought things, she took you places. So they can't be all the time, and you're sleeping 1/3 of the time. So when you get down to it, it's really occasionally she's doing it. Okay, occasionally. And I realized that people had these exaggerated views when they were wounded. And so I put an accountability system to help them see where this individual did exactly the opposite trait to break those labels. And what that did is it made them more resilient and more adaptable. It decreased the probability of having various illnesses and cancers particularly. And it also increased their ability to stop the labels they put on people. Right now, we've got a major label going on between Israel and Palestine. You know, these are all evil, these are good. And millions of people around the world are taking sides and all balancing it out. They don't see that. But the truth is that neither one of them are evil or good. They're just human beings learning a lesson right now and not reflecting and looking at where they do the same thing they're judging. If they did, they'd humble themselves. If they both looked at where they've done the same behavior, they've done the same behavior. I guarantee you can find evidence of it. But they're not willing to see that. So they're going to escalate until they eventually get humbled, and they've killed enough people, and they've humbled themselves economically until they finally realize, hey, this is that I'm actually judged. I've now done the very thing I've judged.
So on that, just touching on that then, John, there's a universal law that you talked about as well too, the law of arrestic escalation. Isn't that where like there's, for every time that there's order imposed, this order is created? Is that something that we're seeing that's going on right now as well too, in terms of war and peace?
Absolutely. The law of arrestic escalation is being full-blown right this minute. I just sent an article up to some rabbis about that just a couple of days ago. And as you see, the massive amount of peace and war that's going on is the people that are demonstrating for peace are balancing out the millions of people going to war. The millions of people that are out doing that are the millions of people that just got displaced. It's just a balancing act going on, and people don't see that, and they're making everything right and wrong, and they don't realize it. And the truth is, if they both sat down and did the Demartini method, if the leaders sat down and did the Demartini method on each other, they would realize that they're looking at themselves. That's all.
Okay, so in that, I suppose for this is probably a deeper question and trying to figure out, that's a universal order. It's not a man-made order. That's a universal process. Is that something that's just always going on, that's unavoidable, and it plays out in forms?
Yeah.
Yeah.
People don't know it. And that's not new. I mean, Heraclitus wrote about that in his time. Plato described it in his time. I mean, this is nothing new. But the truth is never in the hands of the masses. It's in the hearts of the masters. And there are few of those compared to the multitude out there that react. And most politicians are extremist and not centered. You don't have middle grounds. You have people that are polarized, and they want to take a side, and they don't realize the consequences. They're blind to the other side until other people point it out, and they attract them. All the people that are demonstrating against Israel are pointing out the things that Israel's not willing to see. And all the people pointing against the Palestinians are pointing out things that they're not willing to see. But if you look and own it all and see where it all there, it's not hard to see. It's really quite self-evident. But people don't want to see it. They want to be blind. They want to be right. And people who are right don't learn to love unless it's slow, steady erosion of their anger and their bitterness, teaching them eventually.
Okay. On that, John, while you've mentioned those things, then, of all of those universal laws that you've studied, which has had the most profound impact on your understanding of human behavior?
Well, the universal law of the one to many is one, and the other is the law of polarity and the law of androgyny. Those three things, all relationships strive for an androgynous balance of male and female energies, whatever those are. We could get into debates about what is a male and female energy today with all the transgender stuff, but the reality is testosterone and estrogen do certain behaviors in people. If you inject a bunch of testosterone in them, they don't become passive. You put a bunch of estrogen and they don't become aggressive as much. So when you look at those hormones, when you get supported, you get estrogen goes up. If you get challenged, testosterone goes up. These things are there for a reason. And so these hormones or whatever are there. They're biochemicals based on the ratios of perception. If you balance out the ratio of perception, you balance out the chemistry. So one of the laws of androgyny is nature. For every war in testosterone that's going on and competition, there'll be cooperation and trying to peace movements to try to balance it out. The same numbers will be popping up to balance it out. If the war stops, the peace movement stops.
Okay. And for people that are listening and that don't understand what the law of polarity is, then John, what's that? And again,
that every perception that you have is always born with its opposite. So no matter what you perceive, the opposite's there. I've taught people that in my method. If I do column 6 and 13 of the Demartini Method, I say, now go to a moment where and when you perceive this individual displaying or demonstrating a trait, in action that you despise most. At that moment, you're there. Where are you? When are you? What's the content? What's the context? Who are they demonstrating it to? And then at that moment, where is somebody doing the opposite? One or many, male or female, close or distant, real or virtual, self or other. Who's doing the opposite at that moment? And when they become aware of them simultaneously, they get tears in their eyes, and then the entire judgment poofs, disappears. And they get tears in their eyes, and there's love there, because now they've got a synthesis and synchronicity of complementary opposites, which by definition is love. And it liberates people from judgment. And now they have fulfillment, and the judgment's gone. And I've seen that, and I've done it thousands and thousands of cases. So it's asking the right question to equilibrate the mind and to bring it into the present.
Yeah.
The law of androgyny is that basically masculine and feminine, or the law of polarity, all pairs of opposites are born together. They birth together and they die together. And this was written by Heraclitus.
You mentioned earlier, John, the subconscious mind, or the so-called subconscious mind. And there's a lot of teaching out there at the minute around the subconscious mind. And I suppose a lot of confusion information around it as well, too. There is no part of the brain, I suppose, that's called the subconscious mind. But for people listening in, John, what is the subconscious mind and what is it not?
Well, I like to think of the subconscious mind as whenever you have a ratio of perceptions that are imbalanced, you activate the amygdala, the subcortical amygdala, and the limbic system. And when you do, the amygdala assigns valency into the hippocampus, which is supposedly the storage area for survival, the storage of information for survival. And it sits there. So you have valency. Valency is a charge on it, positively or negatively charged. If it's a positively charged, it activates the nucleus accumbens. If it's negatively charged, it gets the hemangula, and it gets to a certain area of another part of that subcortical region. And those basically are polarized. They're judgments. They're there to represent prey and predator, to seek and avoid, and they cause impulse and instincts because we associate something positive or negative or good or bad. And all morality comes from this subcortical amygdala. It doesn't come from the executive center. It comes from the amygdala. It's an animal behavior. Morality is an animal behavior. It's not an angelic behavior. The soul doesn't see things as good and evil. It's the senses that do. The soul just loves. Yeah. The soul is the state of unconditional love, which is the authentic you, when you're not proud or ashamed, you're not infatuated or resentful, you're just being you. And you're present and you're certain. And that state is the authentic you, and that one doesn't judge, and that's the superconscious mind. The subconscious mind stores all the judgments. The superconscious mind stores all the love.
Okay, so
the subconscious mind is the executive center, the frontal cortex, the parietal cortex, when it's synchronous.
Because there's a lot of stuff that's out there, John, and stuff that I've read and picked up on over the years as well, too, that the subconscious mind is nearly like a genie in a bottle. Like whatever you put into it, and you put these ideas in, and you put that in, and all of a sudden it's going to manifest, and it comes into reality, etc. Where does that come from?
A misunderstanding of the subconscious mind. The subconscious mind stores all imbalanced ratios of perception, and anything that you seek, it's going to store anything that's a pleasure orientation that you represent as prey that you're going to seek, and it's going to store anything that's a pain representation that you're trying to avoid. And you can't separate the two. You know, that's what people think. They can try to get rid of one and seek the other. In Buddhism, the Buddha has supposedly stated that the desire for that which is unobtainable and the desire to avoid that which is unavoidable is a source of human suffering. So trying to get rid of half of your life and trying to gain only one side of your life is a futile attempt. But people do it. They live in a fantasy they're going to get pleasure without pain, or happy without sad, or nice without mean, or kind without cruel. Or they expect other people to live in your values, not theirs. All of these delusions lead to what I call the ABCDs of negativity, to try to let you know that you're having unrealistic expectation about life. So the amygdala stores all the information that's imbalanced, and it makes sure you leave nothing unloved. So it's going to keep surfacing in your mind. It's going to keep attracting in the events in your life, you know, like the karmic wheel of the Buddhist. It's going to keep attracting events in your life until you firmly love that event. Anything you haven't loved is going to keep surfacing until you love it, positively and negatively.
So anything that you haven't loved is going to keep resurfacing until you learn the lesson.
See both sides of it.
Yeah.
When you see both sides of it, you're liberated. Until then, you're in bondage to the thing you infatuate with or resent. All you have to do is think about it. Imagine a time when you were highly infatuated with a girl and you couldn't even sleep at night. Your brain was just running all night thinking about the girl that you're infatuated with, or you're resentful to some person that you're really angry about. You can't sleep. Your mind is preoccupied by whatever you have an imbalanced ratio of perception. It's called noise. And the noise is so loud you can't center yourself and be present, go to sleep. And that's because you have an imbalanced mind. If you balance the mind, you go to rest. You're right there to sleep. You're present.
Okay, and you've mentioned that as well too in terms of relationships, that whatever a person hasn't loved in a past relationship, they'll keep attracting into the next.
Yeah, or they'll be seeking. If it's a positive thing, they'll keep being hooked by the same kind of behavior in a guy. You know, I know when people in a relationship that they're infatuated with, they're blind to the downsides initially. Eventually, they discover some of the downsides. But depending on how long they're there, the longer they're there, the more likely the balanced ratio. Just like the greater the sample size, the higher the goal, the distribution of the mean distribution. So what happens if you perceive that there's more positive and negatives, you're infatuated, you're blind to the downside. So then you're going to have this pleasure without a pain. And so if they leave you, you're going to be broken, heartbroken, because, oh my God, I lost my love. No, you didn't. You lost your fantasy. So now if another guy comes along and does some of the same behaviors that hooked you the first time, you're back into the hook again. But if you actually find the downside of the behavior, you're actually set free from the grief of the loss. You're broken your fantasy. And now if somebody comes in there, you're able to see both sides and you don't react. You're not hooked by it. So anything you infatuate with or resent, you're going to be hooked by, and it's going to keep hooking you and pulling you in or keep avoiding. And so therefore you run from the external world instead of run from within by a balanced mind.
So is that an energetic thing then that you're attracting? They actually learn that lesson, or is that just something that you're unaware of and you're seeing it again and getting hooked again?
Well, your amygdala is attracted to that which supports your values, and you automatically attract that which challenges you to break the addiction to it. So if you're addicted to a trait you're infatuated with, you're going to be attracted to it, but you're going to be attracting the opposite to help you break the addiction. Because if you're searching for protection, you're going to get an aggressor. If you're searching for peace, you're going to get a warrior. You're going to get both, because everything's a pole, and the other pole is the magnet. You don't get a one-sided magnet in life. You don't get a one-sided relationship in life. You get a really handsome guy, all the girls want him, and he plays around possibly. Get a really intelligent guy, he wants to know it all, and you got to argue with him. There's always a pair of opposites there, and that comes with it. And you try to get one side and get rid of the other side hurts because you're addicted to one side. When you embrace both of them and expect both, you now have maturity and stability. But most people are attracted to that which they seek, that supports their values, but they keep attracting that which challenges it to break their addiction.
Okay, and the more polarized that they are then, John, is the bigger the slap and the bigger the lesson?
Yes. The more infatuated they are, the more tragic the event comes. Fatal attraction, we call it.
Okay.
Michael Douglas,
Glenn
Close.
So you mentioned earlier about the things that drive us and the things that drive our behavior and ultimately what shapes our values and who we become. And that's around voids. John, could you explain kind of what a void is for people that's listening on? And I suppose the question that I would like to ask yourself as well too is, what were the major voids that were driving you to become who you've become? And do they still serve a purpose? Are they still driving your behavior right now?
Well, every time you're infatuated with somebody and you're too humble to admit what you see in them inside you, you have an emptiness. Anytime you resent somebody and they're too proud to admit what you see in them is inside you, you have an emptiness. That's why when you judge, you feel empty, because you're disowning and you're too proud or too humble to admit what you see in them inside you. It's only by pure reflective awareness you have fulfillment. You don't have fulfillment by judging. That's why no judgment will ever be fulfilling. Even if you win a court case, you'll never have fulfillment because you think you're right instead of love. But the second you have reflective awareness and realize that whatever you see in them, you have, and they're equal, and you're not above or below them, but they're equal. You have equanimity within yourself, which is authenticity, and equity between you and others. And when you do, you have fulfillment. So when you live by your highest values, it tends to make you more objective, where you see both sides simultaneously, which is more fulfilling. When you're living by lower values, you tend to be more in your amygdala, and you keep wanting to avoid a predator and seek a prey for survival. And therefore you have emptiness. That's why if you fill your day with high priority actions, more fulfillment. Low priority actions of distractions, unfulfillment. Now, in my case, I was born with an arm and leg turned in. That led me to having to wear braces. That led me to want to be free of braces and constraint. I wanted to travel and be free. Well, I live around the world today because of that, probably. I then learned I had a problem speaking at 1.5, a speech impediment. Well, I wanted to learn and be able to express myself. I was told that I would never be able to read or write effectively. Well, I'm a scholar and I've now written hundreds of books. So the very voids became the values in my life. But now I don't feel grief or loss or negative about those events. I see them now magnificent. They help me be who I am. But no matter how much you learn, there's always what you don't know, and you have something to keep working on. So I'm going to keep reading and writing and learning because I love that. I love to be able to pass on information to people, and people get their light bulbs turned on, and there's an inspiration in their life, and they go out and do more with their lives.
Let's say somebody's had the same upbringing as yourself, John, and they had the same issues as well too. But then they go down a different path and they go towards addictions, and they end up like maybe not being the person that you've become. How is that then shaping their values, or how is their values being formed in that way? Like, what's the difference? I suppose I'm looking for is that you maybe met a certain person that pointed you in a certain direction, or is it those voids are being fulfilled in a different way for a different person if it leads into addictions, etc.?
No one's going to continue to do something unless they get more advantage and disadvantage out of doing it. So even when it comes to drinking or drugs or whatever, they wouldn't be doing it if they didn't feel that there was going to be an advantage out of it in their value system. Now, they may have a limited repertoire of what they can be doing to get those values met, and they may be founding it in a drug or an alcohol or whatever, and that's less resourceful than what's possible, but they're getting somehow some of their values met, or they would be doing it. And it's usually a compensation for what I call a subdiction. For every addiction, there's a subdiction. A subdiction is something that they have in their memories and their subconscious mind and their hippocampus that's storing, that's painful, that they want to avoid and they want to dissociate from. And so the pleasures of the drinking were a way of managing that, or the drugs that they were taking is a way of managing it, because while they're doing it, they're not aware of this and they don't have to run from it because they're in another world. So that escape may be there. Or they may have actually found a strategy by drinking to get what they want in relationship to that thing that they have avoided. I had a guy that was in Denver, Colorado. His father was an alcoholic. As he grew up, his mother died, and he had to basically take care of all the responsibilities that the mother did. The father said, you have to cook, you have to clean, you have to go shopping, you have to do it, starting at age 4. So he was responsible for doing everything the mother did. Clean the house, cook for him, do the laundry, go get the groceries, cook, pay. I mean, it was a pretty amazing story. But he hated his father after a while because his father was controlling him if he didn't do it, because the father didn't have another woman and expected him to do that. Now, the father made the money, paid for the things, and he had these things in his life, so there were benefits too. But he hated his father. By the time he turned 14, he ended up stealing his father's truck in spite. He went out and got drunk with his buddy, got in a car or truck crash, and his buddy died. When he was at the hospital, his father came there and beat him because he destroyed the truck. How am I supposed to get to work? Don't come home. You're done. You're on your own, kid. So it left him. So in his mind, all the things his father had done, in his mind, he didn't see the benefits to. Not until he came to the breakthrough experience where I showed him. And he didn't see who was doing the opposite, the lady next door that was overprotecting him. So his father had to play the opposite role to balance him out. But I helped him balance these things out. That was his subdiction. He never wanted to be like his father, and he wanted to be avoided by his father, and he was becoming this father by drinking. So I went in and dissolved the anger on his father at the breakthrough experience. He loved his father for the first time since he could recall. I helped him see where the lady next door, like a grandmother kind of lady, was the mother figure. And she was helping sometimes around the house, helping him clean, helping him cook, helping him do things secretly. So she didn't want the father to know, because the father would get upset and beat him up. And so we put the whole puzzle together, found the hidden order in it. And all of a sudden, this kid is like, I'm not angry at my dad. I'm not feeling guilty about it. The death of my best friend, which he didn't know how to process, I showed him how to dissolve that with my grief process and the guilt process. We cleared that. And then all of a sudden, he's poised. And he's in tears. And it's about midnight or 12:15 in the morning. And all of a sudden he's like going, I feel love for my dad. I don't even know ever in my life ever having love for my dad. And I'm not angry, and I'm not needing to run from it, and I'm not guilty. And he cried. And that was the last time he drank.
Amazing.
Yeah. Because he cleared the baggage that was sitting there.
Yeah. And it just shows again, like when you're willing to spend that wee bit of time and delve that wee bit deeper into yourself and ask yourself the right questions, you can get things.
Exactly. I say that there's nothing your mortal body can experience that your mortal soul can't love. The mortal soul is the state of unconditional love when you have a balanced orientation and see the whole thing, and you see the hidden order in the chaos. That's why I love helping people see the hidden order.
Yeah. You mentioned, and I asked you this question in London at the breakthrough experience. We talked about voids, and I think you mentioned it was it called episodic voids, where it could be things that are coming from your parents, from your grandparents, that are also shaping your values. Can you explain a wee bit more about that?
Yeah. There's a thing called multi-generational epigenetics, where the methyl and acetyl tags from things that challenge or support you are passed from one generation to the next vertically through vertical transmission genetically. And this is very powerful because you could have 14 generations back, you could have a grandfather that was in a war that killed somebody and had all these emotions about it. And you could be carrying over in your epigenetics, passing down through the generation after generation, this epigenetic. And you have a tag. So something that reminds you, because every tag and every imbalance shows up as an impulse and instinct in the body and brain. So we automatically react to things that are multi-generational. But we can also have gestational things that occurred while we're in the development. And we can also have post-gestational or postnatal, where all of a sudden we now have the realization of charges that occur after we're born. So we have charges that can create epigenetic tags from birth, during a gestation, and multi-generational. Now, all of them are identified, all of them have been tagged. They're all read on. If you study epigenetics, you can see how they do it, and they can literally impact physiology all the way back in time. Some believe it may go all the way back to single-celled organisms, not just human evolution.
That's crazy. So we could be living out our guilt from our great-great-grandparent?
It won't be guilt, but it'll be emotional tags that will be unconscious of where they're coming from.
Okay. And so for a person to try and actually delve deeper into that and resolve that, it would be going through the method again?
Well, if they can study epigenetics, they can study multi-generational epigenetics. That's not hard to study. There's plenty of literature on it you can study. But in the breakthrough experience, when we actually go and clear stuff, it doesn't matter where it originates if you clear it.
Okay.
It's not really important because it's cleared. And if you clear it, we know that epigenetic tags can be deleted or maintained. If we dramatize things with more emotional charge, we can keep them there. If we neutralize them, they disappear. So whether they came from multi-generational, gestational, or postnatal, it doesn't matter. Ultimately, if you clear them, they're cleared. I'd rather just clear them and not worry about where they came from and guess and speculate. I'd rather just clear them.
Yeah, 100%. So, John, you mentioned the soul earlier. For you, you said the soul is a state of unconditional love, and there was something that you said in the breakthrough experience in London that I actually wrote down, which was the soul doesn't look for a mate, the senses does. So for you, if you were to break that down, what is it that you actually mean there? Because a lot of people are out there looking for a soulmate.
Yeah, I call them the earth mates, but at the level of the essence of the soul, nothing's missing. So when you are infatuated with somebody and put them up on a pedestal, you'll minimize yourself and too humble to admit what you see in them is inside you. If you resent somebody and exaggerate yourself, you're too proud to admit what you see in them inside you. So as long as you're judging, you don't have the soul. You have a lost soul, you might say, because you're in judgment. You're in the terrestrial world. But the second you bring those into equilibrium and you have equanimity within yourself, neither pride nor shame, but just you, authentic you, not imposters, and you're completely not above or below somebody, you're equal to somebody. So you have equity between you and others and equanimity within yourself. You're now in a state of unconditioned love. And the reason I know is because I've taken 100,000 something people through that. and demonstrated that repeatedly once I get them to that state. In that state, you have authenticity. Your authentic self, we could call the soul. That's another name for it. The theologians called it the soul, but psychologists would call it the authentic self, or the non-imposter syndrome, or the Buddhists might call it the enlightened state. Whatever names you want to give it, it doesn't matter. It's still the same state. We're just putting it from a neural correlate state, from a psychological state, from a physics state, whatever name you want to give it. The terminologies are varied, but the same basic idea.
Okay. And that would be the same then as just another term for it, the higher self. Same thing.
The true authentic higher self, or the transcendental self. I mean, James called it the higher self, higher mind, but Jung called it the synchronous you. I mean, there's many names for it. I don't really care about the names. I list all the names, and these are all writers, different names for the same thing. So don't get sitting and go, that's the right name, that's the wrong name. They all have a value.
Who, John, who has had, I suppose, the biggest impact in your life, and who has had the biggest impact in what you do and how you study and how you show up in the world? Is there like one person that's kind of stood out the most that's had the biggest impact on you?
Paul Bragg, when I met him at 17, if it wasn't for him meeting him, I might not even started the journey. I mean, he had an impact. I wear cufflinks. I don't have them on today, but I was wearing them yesterday. Say love and wisdom. Howard Hughes is the one that told me to gain the wisdom of love and the love of wisdom. It's only two things they can never take away from you in your life. Jim Parker taught me the love concept for healing and the secrets behind the healing arts. I mean, I've been standing on the shoulders of some amazing people that I've gotten to meet, most of them in literature that I've read. They all have an influence and all have a value in my life. Majority, because they all had a play in the dynamic. Where I'm at today is a culmination of thousands of individuals that I stood on the shoulders of.
Fantastic. And wrapping up, John, if you were, the podcast is called The Conversations That Matter. If you were to have a conversation with yourself at any time, what would it have been? Maybe when you
conversation with myself?
Yeah. Either a conversation with yourself, or if you were to have or wanted to have a conversation with somebody else, what would it have been?
Well, I love anything to do with maximizing human awareness and potential. So anybody that wants to talk about that, I'm in. So I can do that day in, day out. And I get to do that pretty well every day. So that's it. Anything to do with maximizing human awareness, potential on planet Earth, and helping people live inspired, magnificent, and extraordinary lives, I'm in.
Fantastic. And you're back now, John, doing a lot more in-person events again. Did you just do one recently there in LA? Is that right?
I did one in LA this weekend. The week before that, I was in Istanbul. The week before that, I was in Australia. Tonight, in just a few hours, I'm going to be in London. So I'm going on all over the world with it, but I'm in weird time zones because I start tonight at 2 a.m. So at 2 a.m. this evening, I will be doing an all-nighter all the way till 2 p.m. And then I'll get some rest and I'll start back and I'll do it again 2 a.m. to the 2 p.m. And then I've got an event Sunday night, so I'll probably be up all night again.
Fantastic. And are you enjoying being back in person again, doing events compared to lockdowns and online?
Well, we had the last 2 weeks have been pretty extraordinary. I mean, we had an amazing breakthrough experience in Istanbul. We had about 300 people. And the one in LA was fantastic too. It didn't have but about 70 people, but still it was an extraordinary weekend. And a lot of transformation and a lot of tears of gratitude, a lot of hidden order discovered. And so, yeah, but I mean, I'll do them on Zoom. I don't care where it is. If it's on Zoom, I'll do it. If it's on live, I'll do it. Anybody that's willing to listen to me and put up with me, I'll do it.
Fantastic. John, thank you very much again for coming on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. I really, really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Fantastic. I appreciate the opportunity to be on your show.
If people are looking for your help, John, and they're looking to come to an event or looking to find out more about the breakthrough experience, where's the best place to get you?
All they have to do is go to drdemartini.com, DRDEMARTINI.com, drdemartini.com. you can go on there and go on the media area or the product area or YouTube area, and you can keep on there for the rest of your life, because we're putting out more than you're probably going to have time to go through.
Fantastic. Thanks, John. Really appreciate it. Cheers.
Thank you.